Hello, friends. My name is Darius Thurman, and I'm 52 years old. I've spent most of my life on the road as a long-haul truck driver. I've seen cities, towns, highways stretching for miles, and the countless lives of people passing by, but I never imagined that the most important journey of my life wouldn't be about miles or deliveries. It would be about my own child. At my age, you think you've seen everything, faced every challenge, but nothing could have prepared me for that night. It was late when I returned home from one of my long trips. Something felt off, too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't just mean the house is empty, it carries weight. I found Ethan sitting in his room, shoulders slouched, eyes downcast, like a little man carrying the weight of the world on his tiny shoulders. He was only 8 years old, and yet there was a war in his eyes, a war no child should ever face. I sat on the sofa, and he climbed into my lap, burying his face in my chest. His small hands clutched my shirt like I might disappear at any moment. I could feel his body trembling, a trembling that slowly began to subside as I held him close. Kevin and K.H. Lowe, my closest friends and pillars of support, gave us space, moving quietly to the kitchen to make coffee, leaving me alone with my son. "Buddy," I whispered softly, "I need to talk to you about something really important." He looked up at me, eyes red from crying, full of fear and confusion far beyond his years. "You don't have to be scared anymore," I continued, holding his tiny hands in mine. "I know what was happening when I wasn't home. I know what Mom was doing to you at night." His body stiffened, panic flashed in his eyes. "Dad, she'll be mad if she knows I said something," he stammered. "You didn't say anything, son. I found out on my own," I reassured him. "I installed a camera in your room before I traveled. I saw everything that happened." His eyes widened, disbelief and fear mingling. You saw." "I saw, son, I saw everything. The tape, the hitting." My throat tightened. He lowered his head, shame and guilt washing over him. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered, two words that broke me more than I could explain. My own son apologizing for being hurt, for being a victim. I gently lifted his face, holding his cheeks in my hands. "Ethan, listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong, nothing. What Mom did to you is wrong, very wrong. No adult, not even a parent, is allowed to hurt a child like that. Understand?" He nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt still lingering. Years of manipulation and fear wouldn't disappear overnight. I swallowed hard and asked, "How long has this been going on, son?" He hesitated, biting his lip. Since you started taking the long trips." "She said it was to teach me to be a good boy while you were away." His small voice trembled. "She said if I told anyone, nobody would believe me, that I'd be lying for attention." I closed my eyes, feeling the sharp, heavy pain of guilt. An entire year, and I had no idea. Nights I was away, he had been alone with his abuser. And when I was home, he shook his head. "Not as much, Dad, only when you were asleep." My heart ached as I tried to remember all the mornings he looked defeated, dark circles under his eyes, the times I'd blamed his mood on a bad night's sleep or school stress. All this time, he had been screaming silently. After hearing Ethan's words, I felt a storm of emotions swirling inside me: anger, guilt, sorrow, but most of all, determination. I had failed him once by not noticing sooner, but I wasn't going to fail him again. At 52, I've learned life rarely hands you clean victories. You fight tooth and nail for what matters. And right now, my son's safety mattered above everything else. Kevin motioned me quietly to the backyard. "Darius, what are you going to do now?" he asked, concern etched in his face. "I'm going to the precinct," I said firmly. "I'll show them the videos, file a report, and ask for a restraining order, everything necessary to keep Ethan safe." He shook his head slowly. "You know this is going to destroy your family, right?" "Nia could go to jail." I met his gaze steadily. "Kevin, I know she's your sister, but what she did to my son, that destroyed our family long before we ever stepped into a precinct. A mother who tortures her own child doesn't deserve that title. Yes, the law may punish her, but Ethan comes first. He's just a kid." Kevin nodded, understanding. "You're right. It's just hard seeing your own sister capable of something so dark." "I know," I said, taking a deep breath, "but I failed him once, not again." Back inside, Ethan was calmer, sipping hot cocoa with Chloe. His small smile warmed my heart. I knelt beside him. "Buddy, Dad has to take care of some things, but you'll stay with Uncle Kevin and Aunt Chloe, okay?" He froze, fear returning. "You'll come back, right, Dad?" "Promise?" "Of course," I said, holding him tight. "I'm coming back, I just need to make sure you're safe." Chloe gently suggested, "How about we watch that superhero movie you love while Dad handles things?" Ethan's little eyes lit up just enough to allow a flicker of joy, and I knew he trusted us, even in my brief absence. The drive to the precinct was tense. My phone rang constantly, Nia calling repeatedly, but I ignored the first few. On the fifth attempt, I answered, knowing I needed time. "Hello," I said dryly. "Darius," her voice was relieved. "Kevin took Ethan last night and still hasn't brought him back. I'm worried." The hypocrisy made my blood boil. "He's fine, he's safe with Kevin. And no, she's not coming here." "Not now, not ever." At the sheriff's office, the detective listened carefully as I explained the situation. When I showed the footage, she shook her head in disbelief. "Mr. Thurman, this is a serious case of child abuse. We'll file a detailed report and request an emergency protective order immediately." "Temporary custody for my son?" I asked, my voice trembling with hope. "Yes," she said. "With this evidence, a judge is likely to grant it." I spent hours providing statements, filling out forms, and sending the videos to the police system. Each passing minute felt like both a lifetime and a heartbeat. By the time I left, I held in my hands a police report and a protocol for the protective order petition. Every second had been worth it if it meant keeping Ethan safe. Driving back to Kevin's, my mind raced. Nia was going to be furious, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that my son's suffering had finally been noticed, and justice was starting to take its first steps. When I arrived, Ethan ran into my arms, the relief on his small face overpowering everything else. "You came back, I promised, didn't I?" I said, holding him close. And in that embrace, I felt the heavy weight of responsibility settle into resolve. I would protect him always. The days after filing the report were some of the most stressful of my life. At 52, I've faced challenges, sure, but nothing compared to the crushing weight of knowing your child was in danger and navigating the justice system to protect him. The law can be slow, rigid, and frustratingly bureaucratic, but I knew I had to see this through. Every form, every signature, every meeting mattered for Ethan's safety. Kevin and K.H. Lowe were my pillars during this time. They had opened their home for Ethan, offered advice, and shared the burden of watching my son wrestle with fear. Every evening, I would sit on the couch and watch Ethan laugh a little more, play a little longer. Each small smile was a victory, but I knew the fight wasn't over yet. The first court date arrived quickly. I remember sitting in the courtroom, heart pounding, feeling every creak of the old wooden benches as if it echoed my tension. The judge was firm but fair, and the protective order was discussed in detail. I provided the footage from the camera, Ethan's statements, and Dr. Ramirez's professional reports. My lawyer emphasized the urgency. Ethan could not return home safely, and the court had to understand the ongoing risk. Nia's attorney tried to paint a picture of me as an absent father. "Mr. Thurman traveled frequently for work," he said, voice smooth, almost rehearsed. "How can we be sure the child is receiving proper care when the father is rarely home?" I felt a flash of frustration. I had worked hard to provide for my family, but I had never imagined this would be used as leverage against me. Kevin whispered in my ear, "Stay calm, Darius, focus on Ethan." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I stood and spoke clearly, addressing the court. "Your Honor, my son was abused while I was away. I admit my job required travel, but I never imagined that it would put him in harm's way. The proof is here, videos, reports, and the fact that my son still lives in fear. My priority is his safety, and I will do everything in my power to protect him." Dr. Ramirez's testimony was next. She explained the psychological trauma Ethan had endured, emphasizing how prolonged exposure to abuse affects a child's development. She detailed the importance of stability, parental presence, and a protective environment. I watched Ethan sit quietly, holding Kevin's hand, trusting that adults were finally advocating for him. The judge listened carefully, nodding. When the protective order and temporary custody ruling were read aloud, a wave of relief washed over me. Ethan would stay with me, while Nia's visits would be suspended until further evaluation. The court recognized the severity of the abuse and the need for my constant presence. Outside the courtroom, I hugged Ethan tightly. "See, son, you're safe, I promise." His small voice whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for believing me." Even in victory, I knew the battle wasn't over. Nia could appeal, argue, and attempt to regain custody, but at least for now, my son was out of immediate danger, and that was worth everything. That night, I reflected on the journey so far. At this age, you learn that life rarely offers simple solutions, but protecting your child requires courage, persistence, and unwavering love. After the courtroom victory, life didn't magically become easy. At 52, I was used to managing challenges, but caring for a traumatized child day and night brought a whole new level of responsibility. Ethan's small frame would often curl into mine at night, fearful that the nightmare he had lived through might return. Every creak in the floor, every unexpected knock at the door triggered memories he hadn't fully escaped. I realized that protecting him physically was only one part of the battle. Emotional safety was just as crucial. I had to rebuild trust, to prove to him that no one would hurt him again, not even when I wasn't looking. We developed routines that gave him stability: breakfast together, school drop-offs and pickups without rush, evening walks, and bedtime rituals that included stories, hugs, and conversations. I made it a point to never miss a therapy session or a school meeting, documenting everything to show the court my dedication. Dr. Ramirez's guidance became invaluable. She taught me how to respond to his sudden fears, how to encourage him to speak about feelings, and how to manage his outbursts without shame or punishment. "Darius," she said one afternoon, "children who have endured abuse need consistent, calm, and predictable caregivers. Your presence alone reassures Ethan more than words can." It wasn't easy. Some nights he would wake screaming, crying that Mom was coming to hurt him. I'd hold him, whispering, "No one will ever hurt you again, son." Not me, not anyone. Slowly, these moments became fewer, his nightmares less frequent. Every small step was progress, a sign that his spirit was beginning to heal. We also focused on rebuilding joy. Weekends became adventure days: parks, ice cream parlors, local trips, anything that allowed him to laugh, to feel like a carefree child again. I discovered that the simplest moments, a soccer game in the yard, a shared laugh over a movie, building a small vegetable patch together, were profoundly healing. The practical side of life also needed attention. I had to make work adjustments, moving from long-haul trucking to regional deliveries, ensuring I would always be home at night. At first it felt like a sacrifice, but watching Ethan sleep peacefully, or seeing him smile after a fun afternoon, made every decision worth it. Kevin and K.H. Lowe remained our anchors. They helped with meals, playtime, and just being a supportive presence. At my age, I realized the importance of leaning on loved ones, especially when trying to shield a child from harm while managing your own exhaustion and guilt. One quiet evening, as Ethan lay asleep, I sat on the balcony reflecting. The scars of the past wouldn't disappear overnight, but we were laying the foundation for healing, love, and trust. And for the first time in months, I felt hope that we could reclaim the normal life that every child deserves. The days following the protective order were a mix of relief and constant vigilance. At 52, I had faced many challenges in life: raising a family, working long hours, managing responsibilities, but nothing compared to helping my son heal from the trauma his own mother had inflicted. Ethan's therapy sessions with Dr. Ramirez became the cornerstone of his recovery. At first, he was hesitant. Even simple questions would trigger fear or confusion. "Why did Mom do that?" he'd ask quietly, his eyes filled with questions no child should ever have. I would sit beside him, holding his small hand, answering honestly but gently. "Some people make wrong choices, buddy, but you didn't do anything wrong. None of it was your fault." Dr. Ramirez introduced us to techniques that helped Ethan regain a sense of control over his own world. Breathing exercises, visualization, and structured play gave him tools to manage anxiety and panic. One afternoon, she asked him to draw his safe place. Ethan carefully sketched our small apartment, the yard with the soccer ball, and even the vegetable patch we had started together. "This is my safe place," he said, and for the first time his voice carried certainty instead of fear. I learned to recognize triggers, moments when a sudden noise, a shadow, or even a conversation about his mother could send him spiraling. Each time I stayed calm, reinforcing safety and stability. At my age, patience isn't always easy, but I reminded myself daily that this wasn't about me. It was about Ethan reclaiming his childhood. School became another arena for healing. I stayed involved, attending parent-teacher conferences, keeping in close contact with his teachers, and helping him navigate friendships that were previously strained due to his fear and withdrawal. Slowly his laughter returned, first fleeting, then more frequent, as he began trusting the world again. Evenings were the most important time for us. We'd have small rituals. Dinner together, discussing our day, sharing a story, or just sitting on the couch watching a movie. These moments weren't just about comfort. They were teaching him that life could be predictable, safe, and filled with love. One night, after a particularly intense therapy session, Ethan curled up beside me and whispered, "Dad, I think I'm starting to feel brave again." My heart ached and swelled with pride. At that moment, I realized that our journey wasn't just about escaping the past. It was about building resilience, teaching him that he could trust, feel, and love again. At 52, I understood that life's purpose had shifted. It wasn't just about work, responsibilities, or routines. It was about being the steady, protective presence that my son needed and helping him navigate a world that once seemed terrifying. Healing wasn't instant, but with patience, love, and consistent support, every small victory counted. Even after securing the protective order, I knew the fight wasn't over. At 52, I had learned that life's challenges never really stop, they just change form. Nia wasn't going to accept losing control over Ethan quietly. A few weeks after the order, I received the news that she had filed a petition to revoke the protective order and challenge the temporary custody. The documents arrived like a storm, threatening to undo the fragile peace we had started to build. I called my lawyer immediately. "She's trying to paint me as an absent father," I said, my voice tight with frustration. My work travel had been used against me before, and now it was coming back to haunt me in a different form. "We'll prepare," he assured me. "Document everything. Show the court that you are now fully present, fully engaged, and that Ethan's well-being is your only priority." From that day forward, our routine became meticulously structured. I dropped Ethan off at school every morning and picked him up without fail. Therapy appointments became sacred. Every soccer practice, every school meeting, every small milestone was documented. Photos, receipts, and statements from teachers and Dr. Ramirez were collected like pieces of armor. I wanted the judge to see that my commitment wasn't just words, it was proof. At home, I became hyper-aware of Ethan's emotional state. His nightmares, while less frequent, still happened. Sometimes he'd wake in panic, calling out for me. I would sit beside him, reassuring him that he was safe, that I would never leave, and that no one could hurt him. At 52, my body was tired from long days of work and emotional vigilance, but my resolve never wavered. I couldn't allow exhaustion to compromise Ethan's safety. Nia, of course, didn't remain silent. Through her lawyer, she tried to bring in witnesses, neighbors, relatives, even school staff, claiming she was a loving and attentive mother. Every time I read her filings, anger and disbelief churned inside me. How could people be blind to the reality of what my son endured? But I had learned over decades that justice often requires patience, diligence, and evidence. I also prepared for the psychological angle. Dr. Ramirez provided detailed reports documenting the trauma Ethan had suffered and the ongoing need for stability. These reports were critical. They helped the court understand that the child's safety and mental health were paramount, even over a parent's desire for contact. Throughout this legal battle, I tried to shield Ethan from the stress as much as possible. I didn't want him to feel torn or guilty, or believe that he was somehow responsible for the conflict. Conversations about court were age-appropriate, focused on reassurance and safety. "Dad is taking care of things, buddy," I'd say. "All you need to do is keep being you." Evenings became moments of restoration. We cooked together, played board games, or took long walks around the neighborhood. At 52, I had learned the value of these small rituals. They built trust, stability, and a sense of normalcy that was essential for Ethan's recovery. The day of the court hearing finally arrived. Sitting in the courtroom, I felt the weight of years on my shoulders. The judge listened to the evidence, watched the videos, reviewed Dr. Ramirez's report, and considered all the documented proof of my commitment. When the ruling came, the court denied Nia's petition to revoke the protective order and temporarily suspended her visitation rights. My relief was profound, but tempered by the knowledge that we still had to prepare for the permanent custody decision. Leaving the courtroom, I held Ethan's hand tightly. "We did it, buddy," I whispered. "We're going to be okay." He looked up at me, his eyes reflecting hope and trust, and for a moment I allowed myself to believe it. After the courtroom victory, life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. At 52, I had learned that the hardest battles often teach the most valuable lessons, and this one was no exception. Ethan and I moved into a small but comfortable house, just a short drive from Kevin and K.H. Lowe's home, which became our extended support system. The yard became Ethan's sanctuary, a place where he could play freely, run, and feel safe in the sun without fear or hesitation. Our daily lives became centered around stability and presence. I switched permanently to regional deliveries, ensuring I could be home every night. Every evening, we shared dinners, homework sessions, and bedtime routines that emphasized connection and trust. Nights of nightmares became less frequent, and when they did occur, I was there to soothe him, to remind him that he was safe and loved. Therapy remained a cornerstone of our healing. Dr. Ramirez continued to guide Ethan, helping him process his trauma in ways a child could understand. She taught him coping strategies for fear and anxiety, and gradually we saw a transformation. He was beginning to trust again, not just me, but the world around him. The joy that had been stolen was slowly returning, in smiles, laughter, and playful teasing during our board games or soccer matches. One of the most profound changes was in Ethan's confidence and empathy. He began to look out for others, defending classmates who were bullied or alone. "Everyone deserves to feel safe, Dad," he told me one evening after school, a statement that struck me to my core. Despite all he had endured, he was learning compassion, resilience, and justice, the very traits I had hoped to instill in him. The court battle with Nia eventually concluded. After psychological evaluations and ongoing review, the judge permanently awarded me full custody of Ethan, with any potential contact by Nia requiring careful consideration and professional oversight. Justice had been served, but more importantly, Ethan's life had been reclaimed. Looking back, I realized how silent abuse can exist even in seemingly normal households. Ethan's behavioral changes were his quiet cries for help, and it took a combination of intuition, vigilance, and decisive action to protect him. I became more observant, not only for Ethan but for other children around me, recognizing that speaking up and acting promptly can save lives. Our bond grew stronger than ever. Ethan knew he could confide in me without fear of judgment, that his thoughts, feelings, and fears mattered. Discipline was no longer punishment, it became guidance, taught through conversation and example. We built a home rooted in love, respect, and security. Sharing our story publicly has been another step in our journey. I speak at support groups for parents, sharing our experience and emphasizing the importance of vigilance, trust, and swift action when children are at risk. Hearing from others who have faced similar struggles reinforces the importance of being proactive and compassionate. Now, almost 2 years after discovering the truth, I see Ethan's transformation every day. His laughter echoes through our home, his curiosity and joy are uncontained, and the shadows of fear have been replaced with light. The camera I installed in his room that fateful night didn't just reveal the horror, it gave us a chance to heal, to reclaim a childhood, and to rebuild a life together. To parents watching, my advice is simple but crucial. Trust your instincts, observe your children closely, listen attentively, and act decisively if something feels wrong. Violence is never discipline, it's abuse, and no child should endure it. Your vigilance, love, and courage can change a child's life. As Ethan sleeps peacefully each night, I reflect on the journey we've traveled, the fear, the battles, the therapy sessions, the courtroom, and the moments of joy that make every struggle worth it. We are healing, we are safe, and above all, we are together. To those watching, I encourage you to share your stories, support each other, and stand up for children who cannot yet defend themselves. Every small action matters. And as for Ethan and me, we continue to grow, to laugh, and to cherish the simple, precious gift of safety, love, and family.